and welcome to the first in a newer series that I am getting ready to bring for y'all. The Music in Our World podcast has thus far just been sort of an interview-based kind of thing, but I also think to be able to, have more content available for y'all, it makes sense to try to do kind of a solo thing. And I think, my experience and insight is broad enough and, thoughtful enough that, if you're listening and you follow what I'm doing, you may be able to get something out of it. And also I think it's really cool to sort of start promoting, I guess, the idea that a lot of what we do kind of involves discussion and collaboration, which I think is one of the things that got me to choose the topic I've chosen today for the first episode of this. So there will still be interview podcasts. It's not like a complete format change, but I just want to have these sort of other, very likely shorter episodes sort of in between the interview ones. And that way you guys can be hearing from me a little bit more frequently as the other projects I have are getting underway. So just kind of at the very top, this is one of the things that I'm going to be launching, the solo podcast thing. I'm going to be doing, of course, more interview podcasts and sort of discussion topics. I've also decided to step into the world of video. So I've got, I posted a couple of vlogs this summer, and I started a YouTube channel. It's all under the same Ornith Music brand, so it should be pretty easy to find, plus I'll link everything profusely, of course. But I've talked with a couple of my friends from college that are off doing great things, that I think they need a little bit more time and a little bit more in-depth coverage of what's going on, because I really do think that it's really awesome what's going on. So I'm gonna start adding videos, sort of probably adjacent to the podcast. It won't be completely separate, but it's not going to be just like, the podcast won't be just the audio from those videos. It's going to be a kind of a separate thing. So kind of be on the lookout for that. I'll still be shorter vlogs, anything under 10 minutes pretty much. Will more than likely also end up on IGTV if you're an Instagram person. But I'm really excited about being able to do some of those things. Also, YouTube allows more in-depth exploration of composition. So I could probably do that in an audio-only format. But being able to kind of see a score and kind of see the process, I think that's going to be really, really neat, and it should be pretty interesting. I know that, like, if some of my favorite composers or my composer peers were able to kind of document their process, I know that I would be super interested in that. So it's a little niche, but I'm really excited to create some of that content for y'all. But what I wanted to talk about today, and I kind of alluded to it earlier on some of my blog posts, is the success I had in Virginia this summer. So it's kind of back to school season, or so a lot of places have been in school for a couple of weeks, and I'm kind of following all of my teacher friends' posts and folks I know that are teaching full time, and I don't envy them in many ways. Just being a teacher full time, it always felt a little stifling to me. I do love teaching. It's just one of the couple of things that I want to be able to say that I do a lot. I like helping people get better at something. Whether it's music, whether it's technology. Those are very broad, but those are kind of my little worlds that I'm in. So when I do get a chance to teach, It's really nice for me because I get to kind of be a little bit more involved. It's a project based thing, like with marching band and summer camp, but it's also like getting a chance to work with people, and that's really my main idea for this episode is, what to me, in my opinion, makes a successful, in this particular instance, what makes a successful marching band camp or marching band show or marching band season. I know a lot of these things sort of parallel with the guard world, or even, winter percussion or winter guard, or, indeed concert band. All of this stuff can apply pretty broadly, but for the purposes of this episode, because of the anecdotal evidence I'm providing, I'm going to pretty much relate it to marching band as it goes there. But I think the most important thing is communication. So if, let's say that the goal is to have a good marching band season, there's a couple of things that need to happen for that to fall into place. Whoever's kind of at the helm of everything, in most cases that is a director of bands or high school head director or assistant director who has been specifically tasked with putting together the marching band season. That person has to be profusely organized, I think is how I normally describe that. Dates and budgets and all of that stuff, the administrative side of things, that needs to be done not only early but super thoroughly, and it also needs to be sort of constantly revisited and updated. And also, as all those parts of things fall into place, if there's any other people that are going to be involved, if you buy a show in a box, you need to be right up, you need to be pretty close with the people that you're buying the show from, because even though, we have that in stock and we can send it to you and it'll take a week to get there, well, sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. There's human error, there's busy seasons. If you wait till June to order your music or your entire show, you may not get it in time, or you may not be super pleased with it and not have any time to rectify it. Sometimes it works out, but a lot of times, if you let that communication slide, even though it seems like it's a relatively simple transaction, it may not end up working in your favor. So communication with, if you're going to buy a completed show, that needs to be taken care of early. But in sort of my world and a lot of the people that I talk to, and something I advocate heavily for is a custom design show. And the benefits of that probably would serve better in a later sort of separate podcast, specifically about pageantry art show design, which I've been kind of taking up some notes for, and would love to share my thoughts on that with y'all. But let's say that, for better or worse, we're going to work with custom arrangers. Speaking as a composer, arranger, show designer person, I want like lots of time to do it, just because it's not yet a full-time thing. It's kind of hard to really make a living arranging marching shows, because even though they are a pretty nice surge of income around the fall, or if you do winter shows, around the beginning of the spring, you can't really sustain yourself on that year round. So that's going to be something that you have to do in conjunction with living a normal life, maybe working a part-time or even full-time job. Some arrangers and designers are full-time teachers, so all of that stuff needs to be happening. I think I put my first note on paper in like January before handing the show to the kids we actually got it out in May, but let's say you started July 15th or whatever, or August 1, with a complete show. You'd want to be working on that at least that long, just because there's so many different elements that go into creating a successful show. So, the person kind of at the helm of everything needs to know, okay, I'm going to have such and such person arranging this, or such and such person arranging that. So, if you're working with one person to write winds and percussion, which is, I think, more rare than anything else. A lot of times there's, a wind arranger and then a percussion arranger. But let's say you're working with one person or two people, for example, in the music regard. The concept needs to be kind of already formed. It's not something that is, ideally, you would want to sort of develop the concept and find some arrangements, get some cuts ready to put notes on paper as soon as possible, and maybe even have some ideas in the bank as a band director. Speaking to that point, my experience this time in the summer of 2019 was very much that way. Like I said, I think it was like January. I sat down with the head director and my friend arranging the wind parts, and we were like, yeah, we have this show idea. We want it to sound like this. We want it to be about this long. We want it to feature these sections. And so there was not as much gray area. And those of you who've ever composed or arranged, there can be lots of gray area, and that's hard to work through. Again, especially when you're working on more of a time crunch, or the kids start camp in a week and they don't have any notes in their hands. If there's any gray area, like I don't know what we're trying to say here, what's the story supposed to be, it's hard. But in my case, it was very, very, very clear what we were going for. Now that's not to say that it can't change, because our show changed quite a bit from conception to arrangement to audition process. We changed a couple of things in there to actually implementation. So of course that's one of the things, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But you have to be able to start from stable ground. You have to have the foundation to build the show upon and to make something successful. And it can be simple. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that takes 3 months to create, but it should be ready 3 months in advance. Just, barring all negative things that could happen. Now, that's just the music. If you think about what takes place on the marching field, there's a bunch of other stuff that happens. And that kind of has to happen concurrent with the music, or even a little bit after. The guard has a huge role to play in any marching show. And their capabilities and goals should be also taken into account. I think we did pretty well with that as well this time. We worked with the guard instructor, and that person was very hands-on in designing the costumes, talking about potential choreography ideas, talking about pacing as far as like how is this music going to go, like how can we contribute, how can we work together to make a cohesive idea. We have 2 characters in the show. We developed those characters at that table before the first note was really put on paper, and it was great. So as I was writing some of the percussion music, or as the wind music was coming together, we knew, okay, this character is going to be doing this action and telling this part of the story and contributing this way, and we're like, okay, so they probably shouldn't be playing super loud, or they probably shouldn't be playing at all here, or maybe they need to be playing the main lick from the first theme, or stuff like that. All of that stuff was pretty much spelled out beforehand, which is so great, so great. But then we hit the end of the school year. We already knew what the guard costumes were going to look like. I think we even had everybody sized. That's just, it was just huge. Like there was no questions, that no big questions. I mean, we had some details to work out, but there were no big questions as the kids left the previous school year, with their music in their hands. What's really cool about that, and I will brag on this group that I worked with quite a bit. Some of those kids had their music memorized and passed off before the school let out. That's huge. that speaks to the culture, which I'll get into a little bit later in this episode. But that's another big thing. If the kids have it, you're going to have kids that are going to really knock it out of the park and really start as soon as possible. I mean, they're so excited, and it's going to be their life for 3 months, and it might be their first or second marching band show ever that they've ever done. And so it's really nice to have something to hand those kids who are really, really going after it. But that kind of leads me into, as far as the show being prepared. Let's say that we've got the music, we even know what the characters are doing, we know what the costumes are going to look like. The next step, and why it's so important to be ahead of the game with the music, is because the next thing typically is going to be the drill, the marching formations on the field. So what happens if it gets time to start learning the show, and the music took so long that there's only one movement of drill written? Well, what if you know all the music and you have to kind of stop or play part of your show at a standstill? Sometimes that can't be avoided, and the early competitions or football games, I think everybody knows it's such a big production that a lot of times, you do a movement or two standing still, or maybe you only play 2 or 4 movements, just because that's all you've marched, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I experienced what I consider pretty much to be the ideal situation. The kids left their previous school year with the music in their hands. So they had the music in May or like early June. They came back at towards the end of July, and the second day of camp they got their dot books and their drill spots. The entire show was done. If the music is finished in March or April, which I think it was, I think we finished, maybe had like 1 or 2 small edits in May, but we handed that music to our drill writer, and that person got to work. I mean, they're able to do that because the whole thing is realized, and we made some small tweaks, of course, as is always the case, as should always be the case, but we were ready from day one to put that show on the field. And that level of preparedness, I think, is definitely an ideal situation. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. The sort of the band director, the person running the thing, they have to know and communicate with a bunch of different people. And that happened for us. It doesn't always happen, but it definitely did this time. All of the show was created and ready to go. It's great. It was wonderful. So after the show is created, and even after the kids have the music, the program I was working with, they have not a lot of band staff at the high school, and by not a lot I mean there's one full-time person, and then me for 6 weeks out of the year, and a couple of folks that are kind of nearby who do master classes or private lessons. So the sort of organization and communication things become super, super important when you realize, oh man, if something falls through the cracks, I'm here by myself. Again, not the end of the world, but not a deal. But that was another thing that was just really wonderful. Every day, every time, even every day had a breakdown, and every staff member was sort of kept abreast of that information. I've always been one of those people, like, I don't mind a weekly email. I don't mind a daily email even. I don't mind a text message like, hey, did you get that email? It's got some important stuff. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, because I want to know what's going on. To me, it's always going to be more important to sort of over-communicate that sort of thing. It's always great to know that someone's organized, and what it really is we value each other's time, so we want everybody to know what's going on and when, so that the right people are in the right place at the right time, and that definitely happened this year. So the staff, it's such a variable thing. And I will speak a little bit to that because I do think it's important, and especially in a small staff. It's got to be, to me the approach is the kids have to come first. If the show is ever overtaking the kids, as far as like what's taking up all of your mental power or your time, that's not ideal, and I think eventually that can lead to some bad kind of results. So it's always a pleasure to work with Clover Hill in that regard, because the people I teach with are very invested in the students. They're very capable. There's a lot of really great and varied experience that comes through, and that's extremely important. And the kids are first, and they should be. And that's going to be something like, oh, well, this person's not having a very good day, and they're not doing well at the rehearsal, or they're not hitting their spots or whatever. And I think that's going to take me into my culture idea, and why that's important. When I was in high school, sometimes it was like, oh, you're not hitting your sets. Well, maybe try harder. Maybe it's as simple as that. Well, sometimes it is, and that's an important distinction to make as an educator or even as a student. But sometimes, there's stuff going on that is not something you can just simply get over. And so I hope, I always make a huge effort to let my students know that, marching band is a thing that we all like to do because it's a lot of fun, but it's not the only thing that's happening on the planet. And it's, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes there's other stuff going on. Without going into anything specific, you can all imagine when you've had a bad day at rehearsal, and it would have been great to just I just need to take 10 minutes and get off the field and get my head straight because X, Y, and Z happened, or X, Y, and Z is happening, and I need to just chill out because I'm not hitting my sets and I'm not getting better right now. So, it's a place to learn and be pushed, but it's also not. It's not the military. It's not a professional endeavor. It's kind of a fun extracurricular activity that can yield lots of great results if you do it right. So to me, that begs the question, well, what is doing it right? How do you have a successful program? And that, people ask me, well, what do you think success is? I've had this conversation with a couple of really close friends, and if you're looking at just strict metrics for it, which sometimes is a good idea, sometimes is not the most telling, but to me, the best metric is not a judge's score or a trophy or a certification or whatever that you would win. To me, it's retention rates. So, for example, let's say that you've got a class of your senior class. Let's say it's 10 kids out of 100. Those kids are going to graduate and go do better things with their life. You've got 90 kids that, in theory, could come back to your program. And to me, if you retain 90 kids, you're doing something very, very right, because 100% retention rate is tricky in the ideal situation, even because kids move, there's schedule issues, there's health issues, there's academic things that always need to be taken into consideration. But I always look at that. How did we do? Did our juniors feel like they really wanted to knock it out of the park and spend their last year in high school in the band? And especially to me, when marching band is not a requirement, like it's not at the school I was teaching at, then they don't have to be there. But if they really want to be there, and they'll pay the money, invest the time, and learn the stuff, then that to me is a huge indicator of whether or not you're doing that part of it right. Now, there's programs that don't operate very organized and are not necessarily very high achieving, but that have high retention rates. To me, you could still call that a successful program. Now, if you want sort of complete success. There's a couple of other things obviously that need to fall into place, but if you're keeping the high school kids that are there and you're getting a big freshman class, if you're impressing the middle school kids or junior high kids that are making a huge choice whether or not to be in band in high school, then if those numbers are high, then I think you're doing pretty well. And just looking again at sort of numerical metrics, as much as they are relevant to the question, a successful program should pretty much be. It's different in different places. So I think there's, we do in Texas. It's like, I don't know. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think one is the highest rating. Other places do like excellent, superior, other words like that. And to me, if you're programming well, if you maintain a good culture with a lot of retention, and you're giving at least a base level of technique and literacy, then for most states that I've seen or heard about, being in either the top level or the second level, to me that's success. It's not winning every single trophy and taking every caption, and marching circles around everyone else on the planet. There's so many things that go into winning. That's to me a separate discussion. But to be successful, I think if someone were to randomly walk up to your band and be like, those kids march pretty well. Not like, oh, that's the best show I've ever seen, or oh wow, or all those kids in drum corps. Like, no, those kids have a pretty good basis of skill. They know what's going on. That to me is a pretty good indicator. That actually happened. Someone unrelated to the program came up and was like, wow, your kids have really good marching fundamentals. And to me, as someone who contributes heavily to the marching basics and the movement of the band, I was like, that's the coolest thing that I could possibly hear, because it gets hard sometimes, because all you notice as an educator sometimes is the people who are not achieving, or you notice the kids like, man, you're just like half a step off. I wish you were right in line. But then someone comes in and is like, man, as a band, you guys have a really good basic set of skills, and that's good. That means on average the kids are buying in. The personal achievement of every student. It's hard. It's hard to mandate that. It's hard to quantify that, because, and especially if someone's just walking up, since it's a three-dimensional and something that deals with time. People have bad days. Someone who hits every set one day might go to a competition and miss 5 of 10 holds on the show. But just for someone to put it that way, that to me is success. If you're consistently getting your 1s or your 2s. That's good. Or another way to think about it is if the scores go up every year. If you start at a place and start building your culture and start building some technique, maybe you get a 2, 2, 3 or something out of 3 judges. They think you're not quite there, but almost. And then the next year you get a 1, 2, 2. That's a pretty big improvement. And then the next year maybe you get a 1, 1, 2. And then maybe you get all 1s the next year. If you look at that, that to me is another way to tell. It's like, oh, is this program successful? Well, it's getting better on the sheets. For whatever that's worth, it looks like in general the basis, the average level of achievement is going up as a band, and that's great. That's another thing that I think is pretty much happening here. I've been with this program for 2 years, and I've noticed a lot of market improvement in a bunch of different areas. So. What is success? Again, it's subjective, and I'd definitely love to hear your thoughts. If you want to reply, shoot me an email, or talk to me on Facebook. These podcasts will go out in sort of blog form, so you can always reply to the blog on the website or on Facebook. I'll also be linking to them on Instagram. I would love to hear that one specifically. What to you makes a successful program? To me, if the kids are happy and they have basic skills, sweet. Now from there you can build, and let's be a winning program. Let's be a high achieving one. Well, it's funny. I mean, all the same kind of things sort of build into that. If you have, if you're organized and you're communicating well and you're collaborating well, you're going to probably end up with a show that's written well for the band. And if they move well and play well, then that's going to eventually, lead to some trophies or some medals. And that's I do want to speak a little bit briefly about that with the show design thing about collaboration and how ideas take form. One of the things that's really cool is, with my experience in designing for marching band and indoor drumline, and even a little bit for Winter Guard, I've got a sort of unique experience to someone that maybe hasn't ever designed any of those things. Maybe has just marched. And a lot of band directors never really find the need or desire to arrange a show. And so they'll hire someone. And some people, I was in marching band in high school and now I'm writing marching band shows. Or I did one season of Winter Guard and now I'm writing choreography and drum. That works. But there's lots of people, and I'm only 30. There's lots of people that I marched with that have some really great ideas and that are really diligent and really great collaborators. I think it's always important when you're thinking about show design to collaborate, share ideas. Like, have some, share them with the people that you're working with, and be okay with maybe tabling one of your ideas or changing some parts of it if they need be. Because again, it's not about you. It's not about any of the staff. It's about the kids. And so if someone's like, I heard this kid talk about this show or this specific piece, and maybe you didn't hear the kid say that, and maybe you don't like that piece. But what if playing that piece would make that kid's entire year the best year ever? That's a pretty specific, little hypothetical, but that stuff happens. I've actually seen that more than once. It's always good to have that sort of open mind. And so, collaboration is my second big thing after communication, because it's really hard to do anything alone, and it doesn't really ever need to be done alone. If everybody's where they're supposed to be, then your designers should be bringing great ideas to the table and sharing and collaborating with that sort of thing. So, I think that's kind of the basis for what I kind of want this first episode to be. Just a little bit of expounding upon my experience that I have, and kind of relating it to a real world thing. I do want to tell you a little bit about the show that we created for Clover Hill. Because I'm pleased with it. I think the kids are doing well, and I think they're going to sell it well. And to me, it's always fun to hear someone talk about a project they've been working on, especially if it appears to be going well, and it's something like this where it sort of develops over time. And it's also, there's anything that's going to call itself a music podcast that deals with marching band, I think a show design segment is okay. But this year we did a show called The Cavaliers Return. The mascot for the high school is the Cavaliers, so it kind of worked really well. That's a nice recognizable character. I think that was thinking, okay, let's do a story show. We kind of did an environment show last year. But I think these kids are ready to tell a story and sort of act a little bit. And so we came up with this idea that the band is kind of like townspeople almost. We put a lot of this in sort of pre-Renaissance era music. Sort of, it actually starts with the kids are chanting on the field, like actually singing, and it's a really, really neat effect because Well, one, we get to talk a little bit about like breath control and sound production in that regard, but we also it's a really nice sort of haunting vibe because it's a little minor pentatonic thing at the beginning, and so it was really cool to just sort of see that take shape and see the kids like really get into it, and it really sets a neat vibe. So we start the show with some singing, and right away we have one of our guard members was selected as the maiden, and we have a baritone soloist who was selected to play the cavalier. We toyed around with the idea of just making it a sort of visual only role, but we had some kids march Jersey Surf and do really, really well with surf, and we're like, it makes sense, these kids are going to go do this thing. Let's have it be a playing person. Let's add that simultaneous demand, because I think that they'll get into it, they'll hype it more, but also it will, it'll be a lot more impressive because like, oh man, you taught your 16-year-old baritone section leader how to dance and play his horn at the same time. That's really neat. That's not something that happens at every school, even successful programs. So we went ahead and worked with a playing soloist, and they're in costume, of course. So the baritone soloist has the same costume as the conductors. So the band uniform is kind of white with green and gold on it, and the drum majors and the cavalier are both kind of in black and gold. So they stick out. The band at large marches with shakos, and so the cavalier and the drum majors all three have Aussies. So it's a really, really nice, pretty clean look. The costumes they're nice and elegant, but they're very simple. There's not a lot of parts. It's a tunic and dance trousers. But it sticks out on the field. You can definitely tell, against white band uniforms, there's a black and gold cavalier with a gigantic green feather. Homemade, by the way, performing ballet maneuvers in the middle of the front of the field. So, basically what happens, the show's called The Cavalier's Return. The show opens with the cavalier and the maiden sort of courting one another and getting to know, and it's very evident that like, oh, they're together, they're a couple, or they're becoming a couple. And then we hear a sudden horn call from what is supposed to sound like an off-the-field trumpet. It's a really, really neat effect. It's actually just a trumpet player on the other side of the field. We use horn calls to kind of signify things are happening in the show. And so we have one, little horn call that sort of summons the cavalier away into the forest. And we don't know where he's going. We don't know why. We just know that he's been summoned and that, oh man, he's left, and is he coming back? And we're so sad because he's the cavalier, of course. And so he actually leaves. We have some really cool tree props that are on the field, and he kind of is hidden from sight. And then from there we have a sort of a intense lament that sort of briefly sets the stage for our triple meter and our F minor key, going into the maiden's theme. And so once the cavalier leaves, we kind of get to know the maiden a little bit. And the first movement's kind of feisty. It's in triple meter, and it's got a pretty good clip to it. And it's really solidifies the theme and the sort of feel of the whole piece. It's repetitive enough to where like you cannot mistake that. And it's a super catchy theme. I give all credit to my friend Marcus Grant on that. He knocked it out of the park with that. I'm using a lot of baseball analogies lately. I don't know. I've been listening to baseball podcasts, but the Maiden's theme is very memorable, and the parents left the preview show humming that. So it's like, okay, we did something right. And so they kind of play that, and that's again sort of just setting the environment. Then we have we sort of snuck in a short little drum break. It's a movement I actually kind of wrote top to bottom. I wrote the wind parts for it because we weren't sure what to put between the Maiden's theme and the ballad. And so we were like, okay, let's do something kind of different. So it was in, it was 3/4 and F minor. We're like, okay, B flat major 4/4. It's breaking crazy new ground in marching band land. But it's a little different, and since it was going to start with a percussion feature, I just went ahead and scored the winds for it as well. It's more fanfare-y. It's a lot more brass heavy than some of the other movements, just because we wanted it to be a little bit more powerful. And we have some like really really great brass players that I wanted to kind of show off a little bit. So we ended up kind of scoring the what we call the percussion feature as a little bit more brass heavy and a little bit more fanfare-ish and straightforward. So we kind of moved from that percussion feature into so the Cavalier actually sort of returns to the field, and he makes kind of a big deal about it. The percussion feature actually starts off with horn calls from a trumpet, then a mellophone, and then the Cavalier actually comes in, reveals himself to have returned, and then we're celebrating a little briefly, but he kind of comes and unites the town, and it's a really fun movement. We get to show off the percussion section a little bit. Especially in the front ensemble this year is just killing it. Front ensemble is doing so well. So that we wanted to be able to kind of show off their work and their achievements a little bit, and have a nice big sort of stock marching band moment with some heavy brass stuff. We then go into the actual sort of lament with the ballad. It's very the Maiden and Cavalier. I missed you so much. I was away, and now I've returned. But it was so sad when I was gone. It's a beautifully scored wind book for the ballad. I'm so pleased with it. I wanted the winds to really shine there. So when I was writing the drum stuff, I was like, well, we're gonna pull this back. Towards the back half of the ballad, we actually do have like a small little low brass quartet, which I sort of snuck in there. I'm a low brass person, sort of. I consider myself honorary. I don't know why. I mean, when I was a band director, I learned how to play baritone and trumpet, and actually I just bought a tuba, so I'm giving it my best try, but I've always been impressed with what bell front and valve brass can achieve, especially on the marching field. So we wrote a short little quartet for a tuba, 2 baritones, and a trombone, and I'm so pleased with how they're doing, and I cannot wait to hear what that's going to sound like at the end of the season. It's a really moving moment, I think. It's just showing like how good it is to have the Cavalier back, and how the townspeople sort of have this reverence for him, and it's really cool. It really helps to me kind of sell the idea of the Cavalier being a very significant figure for these people. So we have the sort of the low brass feature again, and then we start it goes into the closer, which kind of goes back to our triple meter thing, sort of. But instead of 3/4 or 6/4, it actually is a true 12/8, almost like a jig. And it's definitely scored in a dance-like manner. It goes back to F minor, which I think is really interesting because it sort of plays with the ideas. Was every minor key, or is any sort of, I think we actually use F Dorian quite a bit. Is any sort of minor third, minor seventh idea, is that really sad, or is it just how we kind of perceive it? And to me, it's not really sad. and the movement certainly is. The closer is very celebratory. It's very, very happy. We feature our woodwinds a little bit. It's a really cool drill move too, because we have a stage on the field, and we're like, okay, what's the best way to help the woodwinds project? And I was, if anybody asked me, I was like, I'll put them all in a big clump together, and that is precisely what happened. They kind of take over the stage, and we have our clarinets and our saxophones and our piccolos. They go up there and they shred for a little bit, and then it's a really cool moment there. So when we're continuing with this dance idea, but what happens next, I can't remember how it actually came about, if it was like an accident or if it was what we kind of meant to do. But we end up with this really fascinating metric modulation. So we go from 12/8 to 6/4. And we were doing it, because the closers, I think about 120. I think we might have bumped it up a little bit, but it's not particularly fast. It feels like it's got some motion because of the triple meter. But what actually ends up happening is when we go into 6/4, at any given time on the field, some of the marching members are marching 180, which is a lot of fun to watch. It's super, super exciting. There's a couple of really nice low voice moments. So, the entire bass clef have a little bit heavier lick with still, keeping a motor in the front ensemble. But it's a lot of really interesting things happening at once. So we've got like half-time marching, we've got quarter-time marching, we've got dotted quarter marching. And we weren't really sure how that was going to work. It's like, how are some of these freshmen going to be able to respond to 3 meters at the same time? And it looks so cool. The kids are doing really, really well with it. So I think we're just going to keep it as it is. And it's going to be such a cool thing. So we have the little 12/8 to 6/4 thing, and then we go back into 12/8. But the meter never really quite resolves until like the very, very last push. And so, throughout all of this, the Cavalier and the Maiden are, dancing in and around some of the marching member forms. It's just really, really cool way to kind of close it out. And the last thing that happens is we've got, a bigger movement, but the last formation resolves into this giant block on side 1, and the stage being on side 2. The Cavalier and the Maiden are up there, doing their princess wave or their queen wave, and the entire band turns around and waves at them and joins in the celebration. Like, oh, they're back! It's so cool. So it's a really, really cool moment, and to me, it's a pretty effective show. The baritone soloist is doing really, really well. He's one of the folks that came back from drum corps, and I asked him, I was like, well, did you guys do any dance? He's like, well, the normal sort of body movement choreography. He's like, okay, well, we're going to go a little bit further with that. There's going to be a time where it's like, okay, you've got your horn, you've got a couple of notes to play, but there's this giant space for you between, the percussion block and the rest of the winds. And you're going to need you to take up that space. And he's like, okay, let's do it. And just every time I see the next rep is better and more cohesive. I wrote some of that choreography for them, but I was like, a lot of this stuff is probably going to have to come from, what you're feeling. What would you do if you were trying to take up space? And, what would you do if you were going to celebrate? And what sort of celebratory dance? We sent them some videos of the dance styles that were around the basic, 100 or 200 year span from which we're drawing the music. And it's been really, really great to see that part develop. The soloists and giving those kids an opportunity to shine and work a little bit. So that's the show. I could probably talk for another, 10, 15 minutes about it, but I would definitely, I'd love to discuss, what are some of your favorite show ideas? What's, as a designer, as a student, as a director, what's some of your favorite shows to teach? What's your favorite show to march? I always love to, hear responses and talk shop with people. because there's so many different ways to look at it. There's so many different concepts and ways to achieve a goal. So I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on collaboration. What makes a successful program or a successful show or a successful season, and then what are some of your favorites, or even your least favorites. I'm always looking for that too. It's like if I'm thinking of an idea and 15 people have come up to me and said, "Yeah, I tried this 10 years ago and it was the worst," or "I tried this last year and it didn't work out for us," I'd be like, "Okay, something to keep in mind." But so I just thank you all so much for tuning in, and can't wait to get this out. I'm going to get it packaged up for you, and hopefully we'll release in the next couple of days. But be on the lookout also for my YouTube channel, any other blog posts. You can keep up with me on Instagram TV. Or you can always shoot me an email or call me on my my business number if I've got that on now. So more than happy to collaborate with y'all and talk some music. All right. Until next time, I will see you later. Be good.